We are talking Shark Frenzy, also known as Shark Waters, and this is directed by Jaden Cowell, also known as Jaden Cowell Fitzpatrick. So this is a movie that was made by The Asylum, and The Asylum of course made these Sharknado movies. And you know, we have to talk about tone when we're talking about a film like this. Now obviously the Asylum makes B movies, yeah? And probably the most well-known of their movies is Sharknado. And when you're doing a film which is silly like Sharknado, you know, you expect foolishness. You expect things to not really make sense, but you go along for the ride. But then you try and make another shark film like this, and it's not the first time they've made another shark film, but you have a more of a straight kind of shark attack story. You know, you can really expect to kind of see less foolishness going around. But let me tell you, there's plenty of foolishness with this one. So let's discuss, okay, what's the story first of all? It focuses on this small fishing vessel, which has got its captain, its mate, and then essentially it's taking out 3 customers out to do some fishing. There's our main character girl who's kind of there on her own, and then this couple that are along for cannon fodder. Also along for fishing. And they, you know, they're out there fishing and whatnot, and there's these particularly aggressive sharks that just happen to be in the area. And inevitably they start attacking this boat. People get eaten, boat gets stranded, and they have to try and figure out a way to survive. What'll happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, Asylum, if you're not familiar with them, a quite well-known kind of B-movie production studio in the States that churn out a lot of quickly produced, you know, B-movies. The writer of this movie, had no credits outside of this, so I suspect it's probably a pseudonym, because the writing of this one, well, we'll talk about it again. But before we get to that, I want to talk about some good stuff. Some good stuff with this movie, because this is one of these films that I think if you look at reviews, if you glance at reviews on like the IMDb or things like that, or it's just going to get slated. And sometimes I think, yes, films deserve to get slated, but there are some elements that I do think, you know, kind of work in this movie. And I want to sort of talk about them for a bit, because it's easy just to go, oh, it's rubbish. But there's a lot of people that work on a film, and it's not all bad. So I've got to say, I think the first 20-25 minutes of this movie wasn't bad. We do get a shark attack in that one, and the CGI isn't great, but you know, it is what it is. I don't expect great CGI with the Asylum films. But one thing I did like about this movie, I thought the setup was relatively strong. You know, we kind of introduced to our characters. And I thought in the first 25 minutes of our main kind of story, the acting was pretty solid from all of the cast. I think people did a good job. We have this our main character girl. She's kind of getting going fishing. Her father can't go with her. She's got a broken leg. I thought their bond seemed quite kind of genuine. The guy who plays the father seemed like he's overacting a little bit, but he at least I thought he genuinely would seem like, you know, he's the girl's father, if that makes sense. I thought that did come across. And I also like the fact here that all of the characters are actually quite likeable. It's very easy, especially in low-budget movies, to have characters that are the douchey one who you know is going to get killed and things like this. But even our other couple, other characters that are on the ship, on the boat, for example, everyone here, all of the characters, I think were, you know, pretty likeable, which makes kind of a nice change, and I prefer that to a degree. I mean, because it gets away from having the false kind of drama that sometimes they put in these movies to kind of inflate the storyline a little bit. But I obviously, when people are going out there and they're going on holiday, they're going to be in a good mood. Everyone seemed quite, you know, keen to get on with each other. I kind of quite liked it. You know, for its budget, and you could tell this was more or less shot just off the coast, not in kind of like obviously too far out to sea and stuff. But I thought the photography was pretty good. I mean, it's a little bit they kind of like come in a little bit tight, clearly, so you don't see the backgrounds and stuff because they don't want you to see to kind of, you know, spoil the illusion that they're actually just off the, you know, just out on the shore basically. But I think it was relatively kind of well, you know, photographed. It made good use of kind of things like natural light and stuff like that. Again, mainly in that kind of that second half. And then, like the acting, there are some CGI shots which I think were quite good. The acting and the CGI are a tale of two halves, let me just tell you. But, you know, there are some elements of the CGI which I thought were reasonably strong for a kind of a low budget movie. More when you kind of see the sharks underwater. Just as I think some of the acting was sporadically, you know, pretty reasonable in this movie. But there are elements that is not the case, which we'll come on to. And I have to say, this movie is one of these films that admittedly is somewhat unintentionally funny, because the ending of this movie is very ridiculous, let me just say. May not be a good thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I can say. And it's, you know, it's competently kind of put together in regards to its technical elements, you know, sound design, editing, things like this. You know, it's competently put together, albeit it's clearly quite put together quite quickly. So let's transition to what does not work. So I've mentioned the writing. So this to me looks like it was written on the back of a cigarette packet during someone's lunch break. The story of this, the writing is one of the worst, even for asylum movies, to be honest. And I've seen quite a few. The setup was reasonable, but I mean, I'm not going to go into every example why I think it's problematic. But that these sharks are aggressive, super aggressive, just because, you know, whatever. Okay, let's just, you know, let's just kind of move past it. The whole third act is ridiculous in its conception, what people do, physics, what they don't do, seemingly ignoring radios, having these random kind of segues to clearly pad out the running time, where we have a rescue helicopter pilot going into a kind of a story about how his wife left him or something like that, literally in the kind of the last 10 minutes to kind of like pad out a couple of minutes extra time when we're meant to have this like dramatic rescue. But it's not the only time. Count how many times also this movie people repeat lines. Oh, go check the motor. Oh, it's blown, Captain. See what you can do with the motor. Oh, it's blown, Captain. Okay. All right. Can we get the motor running? It's blown, Captain. You know, and that's an example. You know, there's so many times that lines of dialogue are seemingly paraphrased or sometimes, you know, just straight up repeated from different characters in kind of different kind of situations. I mentioned I thought some of the acting was good. Some of the acting is not good. For example, our first deaths, our first, you know, people that get killed, our kind of cannon fodder couple. No spoiler. I mean, that's obvious that they were going to go. But it's like, oh, people are looking over, oh, gosh. And then the next minute the captain is making jokes. You've just lost 2 of your customers to sharks. And you're kind of making jokes while you're taking this, like a fish hook out the other person's hand. Ridiculous. I mean, I thought the acting in the quieter moments, outside of like it being misplaced sometimes, wasn't bad. But the elements where people are meant to show like shock or fear, it's nowhere to be seen. There's no type of real emotional response to kind of things that are happening. It is so stupid. This is where I'm saying, like I talked about tone. You know, if you're doing a movie like Sharknado, you can probably get away with it because people aren't expecting a kind of at least somewhat realistic reaction. But in a movie like this, where it's it's trying to be a little bit more kind of like down to earth. You kind of have to have a little bit more of a realistic kind of reaction to things, and not just kind of like, oh no, someone's gonna, oh no, they got eaten, oh, too late, they're gone. Kind of like that, you know. So the acting here is a mixed bag, because there are elements where I do feel the acting from the cast is strong for an silent film, but there are also some terrible scenes. I think our main character, she's acting is probably the best, to be honest, but her direction in some of these scenes is kind of like, it's again like the, you know, look shocked, and that'll do, that sort of thing. You know, it kind of looks, you know, a little bit kind of like it's just been, yeah, that's fine. And then the CGI I mentioned as well. There are a couple of shots where, you know, the CGI looks okay, and I was like, you know, that's not a bad CGI looking shark. But generally when the sharks are attacking, that's when it really kind of like, it is quite poor. So I'm wondering if they're using like pre-generated kind of images for the kind of like the better shots, ones that they could just pluck out of the Asylum's kind of library, which look better, and the ones that are kind of specific to this film look kind of bad. And you know, it's like drop-in effects with the kind of like the blood, because you can kind of see it's not moving properly and things like this, you know. And then you get a bit of, as with any typical Asylum film, there's a reasonable amount of kind of stock footage and stuff as well, which I don't have a problem with. I think sometimes these things, you know, you can make them look a little bit more cinematic, but it's very typical of the kind of the Asylum. But the real issue for me here, I could have looked past some of this stuff, but they just, like I said, the ending here is just, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but oh my god, it doesn't make any sense in multiple different ways, and I'm not going to say why, because it is like the climax of the film. But you'll be watching this and thinking, you know, I thought this was a lackluster shark film up until this point. Now it's going into bad territory. You know, and I even think the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes were reasonably strong, you know. But it's a gradual downhill for this one. And it does push it into bad territory. Now, you can do the kind of straight-to-video shark movies. We've seen it in 2022 Sharkbait, which I thought was a strong film. But this one, yeah, it's kind of swimming around the bottom of the kind of the ocean depth for me. This one was quite a poor one. You know, it has a few elements that I thought were reasonably well done, speckled through the movie. But overall, as a kind of as a watching experience, as a film, and as a fan of someone who enjoys shark films and enjoys, you know, the low budget shark films, this one was definitely on the weak side of this kind of thing. So it's going to be a 3 out of 10 for this one, and I feel kind of bad, but there it is. You know, it's a young film. The director's quite a young guy, but you know, I got to call it like I see it. So it's a 3 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to you next time.